minutes, I think.
Great. Okay. So we can see your slide. So please, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to talk in my talk a little bit today about the sort of mental health benefits of learning languages. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of languages for science, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of languages for scientists, and not so much in a career perspective way, but in a not going absolutely insane while you're an academic type way. Let's see if I can move to my next slide. The obligatory list of languages that everybody seems to have today. I'm a psychologist. I should tell that first. I work in the psychology department at Lancaster University, and my main research is on lie detection. So part of that means that I do lots of very boring work with language. So there's a lot of interviews that need like coding and reading through and splitting up into little categories and details and stuff. So I do a lot of sort of boring language work, and all of that's in English. I work in Lancaster. It's all English, but originally I'm Dutch. So Dutch is my mother language, the language I feel most comfortable with, the language that I use to learn other languages. So when I learn a new language, I do so by translating back to Dutch, not to English, because English will always be another language to me. And I do find that learning new languages is detrimental to the other languages that I already know, and English is one of the languages that will suffer if I learn a new one. The exception to that is computer languages, because I do program in R, and I do that in English. So even though R is a language of itself, it works in English. So computer languages are English for some reason. Beside that, I speak a little bit in Swedish. I had the opportunity to chat in Swedish in the chat earlier today because I have some family members who are originally from Sweden. So it has left me with a rather lopsided experience of Swedish. So I'm excellent on children's songs. I'm also very good with like some important practical stuff, but I don't actually like know the grammar very well. So I can read it reasonably, but my speaking is already much weak. And when I was chatting in a chat to someone, I was like, I don't know how to spell this. And I definitely don't know how to conjugate verbs properly. I always just chuck the main verb in. I learned German in school originally, which when you speak Dutch isn't that difficult to learn. You know, it's different from Dutch, but not that different in the end. And also I have some family members who are originally from Germany, so they have sort of helped me keep the language up a bit, allowed me to, you know, actually learn how to speak it rather than work it in school. In school, I also learned French. There was a speaker earlier today who spoke about how they wanted to like study both chemistry and French. And I was the opposite way around. I studied French purely so I didn't have to study any chemistry. Like you were forced to choose school topics in a certain order. And if you picked French, you couldn't pick chemistry. So that was me learning French. I actually quite enjoy it. It's gone downhill a lot. It's been a long time since I seriously spoke French, but at the time I could like, you know, read quality literature and stuff like that quite well. I learned Latin in school as well. And although I've never actually found any direct practical use, I've never met anybody else that I spoke Latin to, I've actually found that really useful in preparation for learning computer languages, because they taught Latin in school in a way that was very much about the logic and about the order and about the structure, and not about, you know, speaking things or buying ice cream. In a certain way, my Latin is the exact opposite of my Swedish. Everything I can do in Latin, I can't do in Swedish, and the other way around. But that sort of focus on the practicality of the language and the structure of the language has helped me, A, learn further languages, but also helped with computer languages. I started learning Spanish in the evenings when I did my PhD. And this is a little bit where the loneliness element come in. So I started learning Spanish in the evenings when I first moved to the UK, when I was working on a PhD, when I was living in a strange city, in a strange country, with a language that I already sort of knew. And I wanted to do something with myself, keep myself off the streets. So I started learning Spanish. The Latin was really, really beneficial when it came to learning Spanish. And then Arabic, which I first learned during lockdown, irlak, I've been told. It's called in Arabic. And I started learning that more or less for the exact same reason. Like, it was lockdown. I wasn't supposed to go anywhere. I had to keep myself off the street. I had to keep myself from going absolutely insane. I thought, you know what? I'll learn a language. And I went on the Lancaster University website and I had a choice between Arabic and Chinese, but Chinese was on Mondays and I wasn't going to do any language learning on Mondays. So this is how I started Arabic. And then as I started Arabic, I spoke to an old friend of mine who has always wanted to learn Arabic. So when my first course finished, she's like, well, why don't we both take an online course together so we can both learn Arabic at the same time? So those are all my languages, which is like a very short list compared to a whole bunch of people we've seen today already. But what I wanted to talk about is the social aspects of languages. So languages are inherently social. That's what they do. They're meant for us to communicate, but they're not just meant to communicate facts or things about the world or observations or science. They are what we use to keep our relationships going. And we know from previous research that language learning is actually very good for people's well-being. So it increases people's happiness. And this increasing of well-being is actually quite separate of the learning of the language. So it's not just that people learn the language and that's what gives them the benefits. It's not just that if they learn the language better, they'll be happier. It is the process of the learning itself that is beneficial to people. So even like if you take, so this was research, this was done on older people, that even these people were taking courses and some people were getting absolutely nowhere with it. The thing is they were having fun. They were enjoying it. They were feeling better because they were taking these actions, even if the actions weren't actually particularly productive. So you don't have to be good at a new language to gain the benefits from learning it. And even though this research was conducted on older adults, I think for academics or scientists, this is also really valid. Being a scientist can often be lonely. And I don't want to insult any scientists in the audience here, but some scientists are, you know, really interested in maths, which is like good fun. And there's lots of other people who love maths, but it's not like there's massive communities, like there's not like massive competitions where 50,000 people all go to the stadium and cheer on mathematicians. You know, it's not necessarily the most mainstream hobby to be a scientist. And then especially if you don't work in large collaborative projects, it can be the kind of thing that can be a lonely experience. And I think that even when scientists work collaboratively, it gives us a social interaction that is structured or has particular goals or consequences. So a lot of social interaction that scientists do are what we might call networking, which is valuable and does very important things, but can also be draining for people. Like networking with other scientists isn't necessarily the same as having fun with friends. And for some people, that's okay. Some people can have loads of fun and go to networking events and meet people and have a brilliant time. We saw people earlier who can do that. But that's not necessarily a skill that everybody has or that everybody's comfortable with. So, you know, you get introverted people, and I count myself among them, for whom all of that social interaction and that sort of semi-professional scientific social interaction is quite scary. And this is where, at least for me, and I think for other scientists, language learning can come in. Language learning can be a hobby that stimulates your mind, makes you feel like you're, you know, doing something productive, and allows you to make friends in a non-work, non-scientist capacity. It allows you to be the opportunity to be someone that isn't entirely tied up with your scientific identity. So long to long term short, basically I could say language learning can be like the nerdy equivalent to drinking in pubs. And I think we should do more of it. I stole all of the pictures of the slides. You can see them here. Thank you very much for listening to me. I know I gave a somewhat shorter talk than most other people, but good for the schedule. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Lara, and thank you very much for keeping to time. We have time for one question. So please put your hand up in the chat. Okay, I'll just ask a very general question. I mean, you talked about language learning can happen in many different ways. You can have group learning, you can have individual learning. And how do you think these different styles of language learning can influence well-being in the manner you describe?
I think they depend heavily on the kind of person you are and what makes you happiest. So I think if you're more of an introverted person, language learning is something you can do for yourself, but it's also a good excuse to, go to group classes or, for example, the way Lindy raised it, to talk to people you might know vaguely. It can help you bond with people that you don't know that much. I mean, maybe this is just me, but like whenever I meet other Dutch people or sometimes also Afrikaans people, because you can speak Dutch to Afrikaans people, you can go, hello, I don't know you, but it is an easy in to start that conversation.
Yeah, indeed, that's so true for language. Right, one very quick question from Coote and one very quick answer, please.
Hi, I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to share that I could really relate when you talked about mental health, and during lockdown, I realized that very well. I interacted with my students through online teaching, and I think that helped me keep my sanity because I didn't have any other human interaction whatsoever, and it was very depressing. But actually I had good time because I taught every day for a few hours and prepared for it, and that was very good for me, and I was actually happy. I didn't expect to be that happy during that lockdown.
Yeah, man, I think I very much agree with Coote that it was sort of difficult. And then to me, because I was also teaching, I was still doing work, so I was meeting at work, but it became very important to me as lockdown went on that I also had, like a lot of the contact I had was work related. So they were people who were sort of forced to talk to me, and I wanted something that was mine but also involved other people, that wasn't work. Where I could slag off, like nobody would judge me if I hadn't done something for a particular week. And I found that Arabic was really, really useful in that content. I must specify, by the way, that I haven't learned much Arabic. I've been learning it online for 1.5 years now. And still, I can just about listen to the Arabic version of Sesame Street and pick up half of what they say. That's the level of what it is. But it's kept me sane.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the talk on this topic, and we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Susannah Coote from chemistry.